Let's get it, baby. Woo, what's going on, you guys? It's your boy 3 Stacks in this thing, baby. Representing Team Kings of Games. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the top 10 best decks of the format. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Let's get serious. Okay, so I don't do top fives. It's like a pet peeve of mine. It really is. It's like how some people think that like either limit it or keep it at 3, but don't do a semi-limit. It's like that's how I feel about top 5 best decks of the format. I feel like the top 5 is so easy to guess. Even somebody that doesn't play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh could easily guess what the top 5 best decks are. Top 10s for me are just better. They're more thorough. They help out a lot more of the players. They provide more information and also shine light upon decks that are not actually underdogs, but decks that are performing just as well, but just don't get as much spotlight just because they're not the 5 best decks, you know. But I like to cover the top 10 best decks because there's normally 5 other decks that really do deserve it and are doing just as good and also, well, not just as good, but are doing fairly well themselves and have potential to do even better if they are simply provided with more representation. The decks that I'm mentioning are decks that already have the platform laid out for themselves. They're strong decks. Konami made an incredible blueprint from them, for them, and there's so many things that you can integrate into these decks to make them even better. So just because they're not the top 5 best deck doesn't mean that they can't beat the top 5 best decks and cannot potentially be the top 5 best decks. So the bottom 5 are going to be probably just as good as the top 5, if not sometimes better. It's just all representation. A lot of people really fail to realize that about Yu-Gi-Oh! In general. Whenever you think of meta is actually an acronym which refers to the most efficient tactic available. Now, what makes decks meta is obviously, for me personally, I think representation is the most influential element when you think about that, because no matter how good a deck is, if a lot of people aren't playing it, it's not considered to be meta. And because a lot of people play the top 5 best decks, that's what kind of puts them in a hierarchy above the rest. But I still got to give honor and shout outs to the other 5. So top 10 it is. No more rambling. I wrote this list while I was at work. I wrote it on a piece of paper. This is the paper that I wrote it on. I was actually in the middle of probing and then digging some holes, and then we had to set up form before we poured some flow filled and concrete into the other form, and we wrecked some stuff. But in the middle of that, I was taking little like 30-second breaks to grab a pen out my pocket and write on this piece of paper because I knew I was just really excited to do this. So first I want to do honorable mentions, because there's always, every time you do a top 10, you have to keep in mind people are always going to get upset and in their feelings if they don't hear their favorite deck. And it's like, it's hard to please everybody, and I just think, don't get upset. Don't get in your feelings. Don't be all salty just because your deck didn't make the cut. It's like, I understand sometimes I wish certain of my decks that I play could make the cut. But honorable mentions are as follows. So we're going to give honorable mentions to Mermails, to Super Quantums, to Madolches, to Infernoids, to Invokes and Magnites, to Prank-Hits, to Gem Knights, to Paleozoic, and any other deck that I forgot. Literally any other deck. Just so that I don't hurt anybody's feelings and have somebody really upset because I didn't mention their deck in an honorable mention. Please do not take offense, because I'm not trying to offend anybody. All right, so now we're going to go into the top 10. I have the decks here. I have a vast majority of the top 10 decks that I have on the list, kind of just to show you guys the actual deck as I talk about it. So we're going to go into number 10. First, I have it in a subcategory. So I gave it to Guru Control and Draco at the same time because both the decks function very similar to each other. So whenever I do top 10 best decks, I always talk about the strengths and the weakness of the deck. It does no justice to just tell you what the best decks are, because most people know that. But when you get that better understanding of exactly what put them in the position that they are, and some people think, well, why does Strikers get to be better than this? And why isn't this better than this? You know, you talk about the strengths and the weaknesses and you understand. So first things first, the strengths of Guru Control and Draco. Both decks function very similar. I would say that Dracos do kind of have an edge over Guru Control. That's just me. They have a better potential of going second in breaking boards. They have the ability to actually play more consistency cards. Cards that enable you to do the same thing over and over in a repetitious manner, like the Demise and the Desires and the Duality. And even, you know, if you want to go that far into the Void and Upstart, and they have the Diagram, the Terraforming, all their True Draco spells let you draw cards. They have a lot more draw power than Guru Control does. They're able to dig into their floodgates faster. They can play very reactive too. I know a lot of people play the deck proactive, but the strengths are as follows. The deck has high damage output. The deck's able to grind for a very long time. It has the ability, like I said, to pick boards apart systematically. It's really good at breaking boards. It can establish entire ridiculous fields with 2 to 3 Draco monsters and 4 or 5 back rows, and the ability to recur and do that in a consistent manner. They can play some of the best floodgates in the game, and none of the floodgates hurt them. Summon limit don't hurt. Anti-spell rarely hurts because they normally can just out the anti-spell. There can only be one goes in match and Rivalry of the Warlords and summon limit. All the monster restricted floodgates do nothing to this deck because it doesn't need to summon more than 2 times to get the job done. It doesn't need to control monsters with different types because they're all worms. It doesn't matter if you can only summon one with the same attribute because it has multiples of the same attribute. And it doesn't matter if they have to sit on one. So because those floodgates do not hurt the deck, you can also play them in the main deck in a comfortable manner where you're not going to end up, it's not going to come back and bite you in the butt where your floodgate's hurting you. And also keep in mind that Dracos can turn their own floodgates off by tributing them to summon a Draco monster or popping them with Diagram or using the effects of their spells like Disciples and Heritage. So the deck just has so much strengths in general, and a lot of people already understand this about Dracos, and you just have to keep in mind the deck is pretty good at going second. At the same time, it can main deck, in addition to that, Monarch's Erupt, which is a floodgate that Guru Control cannot play, which essentially just turns off monster effects in general, and also can play Domain of the Monarchs, which gives it another strength and a higher ceiling. The fact that it can not only lock you out of monster effects, restrict what you summon and how many types of monsters you control, but prevent you from going into the extra deck, and then stop you from playing your spells by playing Anti-Spell and Imperial Order. It can just really do it all. It really can in the terms of just locking you out. It's a very proactive deck that can be reactive because the Draco monsters themselves are reactive. Their spells and traps can be reactive. You can play Strike on the Monarchs and Stormforth. You can play reactive cards. You could still main deck counter traps like Solemn Strike. Impermanence is very reactive. The deck is just so strong, you guys. It really deserves the top 10 slot. It deserves its slot. And then Guru Control on the other side has very similar strengths to Dracos, except there's a little bit more that it has. Well, not more. There's a difference between the two. They have similar strengths, except some of the strengths Dracos have, Guru don't have that. Guru does not have that. And I'll just say Sub-Terror, because Guru Control, that's not a deck. It's a Sub-Terror deck, bro. It is. It's a Sub-Terror deck, okay? It's Sub-Terrors. So they have the ability to play cards like Final Battle. They have Guru himself. They have a negation in the form of Fiendus. They have that recurability. They have removal that doesn't destroy. Like Dracos have targeting and destruction removal. Well, Guru Control or Sub-Terrors, which is what I want to call it, has removal that doesn't destroy, which kind of gives it a little bit of that strength over the spot removal that Draco plays. Don't get me wrong, he used to play Stormforth and Strike of the Monarchs. And then in addition to that, the ability to book them on your opponent's monsters can be really, really strong. And the abilities of Hidden City allowing you to grind, negate attacks, and kind of just you slowly wither your opponent down. And it has pretty solid recursion as well. Some good searchability. And again, it can play all the floodgates that Draco can play. Relatively comfortable, except for Rivalry. I'd say it can't really play Rivalry because it hurts more than it helps. But the weaknesses of the decks are virtually the same. They are back row reliant decks, meaning that they are susceptible to a lot of side deck staples like Twin Twisters, MST. Dinko Sekka is going to hurt sometimes, but just keep in mind, sometimes just the looming threat of a Dinko Sekka can force even good players to activate all their floodgates early when they're not supposed to, and they can get punished by that. But you can play Dinko Sekka against him because it's still pretty strong, especially Guru, because Guru doesn't play only floodgates. It has reactive back row like Called by the Graves as well. Evenly Matched and Red Reboot are other cards that can just really hurt this deck a lot. I know Trap Eater is not very popular, but Trap Eater is another card that can really hurt these decks. And sometimes just taking away the card that starts everything up can really make Sub-Terror fall apart. I'd say Dracos are a little bit harder to stop, but sometimes Sub-Terrors, just Ghost Ogre on the Hidden City can really just do it for them. But yeah, those are the weaknesses of the decks. Ghost Ogre is pretty good against both decks. Next up in number 9, we have Dinosaurs. Where's my dinos at? Move the Dracos. Bam, Dinos. So Dinos definitely, as much as I really do dislike this deck, not because it's a bad deck, but because it is really the reason why Dinlong got banned and why Lithosa Gym got banned, and I'm a true King Yang player who's been salty for over a year about that. But it made the top cut because it was already a strong deck. It already was. This deck can put up some monstrous boards, bro. I mean, Calamities, Conductor, Logia. It can put up Doka. It can put up Overtext Quadless. Like, the best board I probably put up legitimately, it had a Land Fornicus with an arrow pointing down to Logia and an arrow pointing down to Calamities, and then an Overtext Squadless just chilling. And I was one dino short of summoning the Conductor in hand, but I only had one dino in grave. But the deck can really put up some nasty boards that can lock you out. It has some really strong potential in the terms of breaking board. There are so many engines and implementations that you can integrate into this deck that can just allow it to be a lot higher ceiling, give it that a tad bit more of consistency, or fix some of the fatal flaws that the deck has, like the Shaddoll engine, like the True King engine, you know, stuff like that. Those are just some really good ways you can play dinos. Lost World Dinos is still a strong deck. Dinosaurs are just so powerful, and there's a lot of weaknesses that the deck has, but there's a lot of weaknesses that most decks have. I think that the strengths outnumber the weaknesses. Like the strengths of this deck, outside of like Overtext Squadless and Fossil Dig, you know, the consistency cards, you've got Miscellaneousaurus providing the protection for all your dinos to just be unaffected by activated card effects during that main phase. It's pretty redundant. You can play around hand traps, disruptions, and sometimes it's just smart to activate Miscellaneous first, so that way you're not playing into like Solemn Strikes and things of that nature. It's a really strong card. Miscellaneousaurus coming back to 3 does kind of make a difference. I'm not saying the deck's just, oh, it's automatically meta now. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that dinos have never been a bad deck. They might get a bad rep. I might dislike them, but I'm not going to be biased. I'm never biased with my top 10s. Dinos really do deserve the credit. Conductor himself is just a beneficial accrute mat. It's just a strength that no other deck really has and that consistent access to. It's crazy. You can break boards full of negations just by summoning a Conductor and just attacking over all of them without even activating his effect. Just attacking every single one of them. He just clears boards by itself. You can clear Pendulum boards. If you could just bait the Spear, you could just summon Conductor and attack into Endymion, attack into Vortex, attack into the Amorphage monster they summon. You can attack into the Don Dragster. You can literally break the entire Pendulum board just by playing through one interruption being the Spear, and you just summon your Conductor and you ram everything over through battle. It's crazy what Conductor can do itself. A Book of Eclipse on legs that can stop Salamangreats, that can really doodle all over Pendulums. It could be really strong against combo decks, including Orcust as well. Keep that in mind. It's just a strong card. This is one of, if not the strongest card in the Dino archetype itself. It's just, even as an engine, just splashability, Conductor's just an insane card. Overtext Koalis providing a negation for the deck. The access that it has with the Shaddoll engine, Shaddoll Fusion being that one card combo that generates that much advantage. True King variant, being able to just spit out Calamities and lock you out of monster effects and drop a Conductor and drop a Logia. The fact that the deck can make Logia and Doko, which are rank 4s that almost every deck can't even make. It has access to toolboxing cards in its toolbox, in its arsenal, that decks can't even exploit. It has cards that it literally can exploit that other decks can't. It's such a monstrous deck. It's really strong and it's really dangerous, and it can build, I mean, it can kill any deck. It really can. It has that potential, and all it has to be, all it needs is the right player. It just needs the right pilot. It needs to be in the correct hands. Anybody could take this deck to the top because it's proved itself. It literally won a Worlds, and because it won Worlds, it got itself nerfed on the ban list. So yeah, Dinos, they're incredible. The weaknesses are probably locking out the graveyard, preventing banishing, like through cards like Lancia, DD Crow. Sometimes Ash Blossom and Valor are just too much. The deck can really be crippled by hand traps. Ghost Ogre is really strong against Conductor, and you never know. Sometimes a well-timed draw can shut it down, and then traps. The deck's really weak against back rows like Torrential Tribute, and there can only be one, and you know, goes in match, not rivalry, but goes in match, and you know, things of that nature, and summon limit. Those are some really relevant weaknesses that most decks are going to be piloting in today's metagame that this deck has. But anyways, continuing, let's see. Whew, let's speed it up. Now for number 8, I gave it to Crusadia Guardragon and all Guardragon decks as a whole. So I would say Guardragon, but I had to put Crusadia as a label on top because Crusadia is probably, in my opinion, the best Guardragon variant. Even though, yeah, Danger Thunder is a good deck, it really is. But I've seen what Crusadia Guardragon can do, and it is just stupid. I have pictures that I can show you guys where my homeboy Q, literally, no exaggeration, he had a Gamma Seal with the loaded counters on the field spell. He had a Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss. He had a Don Dragster. He had a the level 5 Synchro Natrui Beast, and he had that World Legacy thing that negates effects from extra deck. He just had it all, and he had the Heretic Seal because he took the Saurija Skull Dread and his Draco, he turned those into the seal. So not only did they have the Gamma Seal loaded when negates, the Naturia Beast, you know, the Don Dragster, the freaking, the thing, what's it called? It's like a World Legacy card. You guys know what I'm talking about if you play Crusadia. And then the Spear, you literally have 4 interruptions, and Gamma Seal's just too much by itself. That's a nasty board, and Danger Thunder Dragon cannot make boards like that. They can't. And it's just the fact that the deck can play the Kyoto Waterfront effectively, and it can make Naturia Beast, which is something that Danger Thunder Dragons can't. The deck can do things that Danger Thunder can't do, while of course Danger Thunder can do things that it can't. But I just personally believe that Crusadia is the best Guardragon variant. It exploits everything about the Guardragons, including Red Eyes Darkness Metal. But I say Guardragons in general as a whole, just take the number 8 slot. Even though Crusadia Guardragon hasn't had that much representation lately, it came out the gate swinging, brother. It came out the gate swinging, and it like took over for a while. It was a hot second, don't get me wrong. It wasn't for like a month. I mean, it wasn't for a couple months. It was for like 1 month, but the deck, it still has that potential. Nothing has happened to it to where it's just nerfed on the ban list and it can't be played at its full power. It's just players have just started moving to different avenues, but the deck is still at full power, buddy. You gotta acknowledge how good this deck is. Now, while it has all these extremely incredible strengths, you know, the ability to just assemble these boards with 1 to 2 cards and the consistency of just playing the 15 Crusadias, essentially, which are your combo makers. It can play the Danger Engine. It exploits Kaijus like no other. It can still OTK you just with standard Crusadia plays with Equal Max, just pumping them up and one-shotting you. It has all these strengths, and then just putting out the negates. It can make boards going second. I mean, it can make boards going first. It can break boards going second. It's a well-rounded and strong deck that doesn't really have anything missing in the terms of what it can and cannot do. It really can sort of do it all in a sense, just in its own flair and its own style. The weaknesses are the deck is very fragile in the beginning points of the combo. Hitting Spatha or LP can kind of just do it. It can sometimes just be the end of the turn, but if it gets past the beginning point and gets to the middle and the late of the combo, if you try to interrupt it there, it can still play through those interruptions. So I'd say it's really the weaknesses outside of, you know, floodgates and very specific trap cards that can really hinder it. I'd say when you use hand traps against it in the specific beginning points of the combo, like Ash, Ogre, Veiler, and Permanence all hurt this deck in the beginning of the combo. That's really its weakness. It's just fragile to start off, and that's kind of what makes some people unattracted to it, the fact that it's so fragile when it gets started, but once it goes off, it goes off. And then next up in number 7, I gave it to Cyber Dragons. Now, Cyber Dragons are that deck. Oh yeah, and this was like my little this was the deck that represents Crusadia Guardragons. I don't have my Cyber Dragons, unfortunately. I don't have that deck to show you guys as kind of like the representing the deck to represent it. But Cyber Dragons are insane, you guys. We all know about Cyber Dragons. They're a pretty old deck. They've gotten a lot of new support over time. In general, it's a really, really powerful going second deck, and I think it's better going second than it is going first. It can incorporate so many cards like generic machine type support. It has the ability to kind of toolbox and search out any light machine, which means you can search for Jizakirus. I believe Cyber Eltonen's a great card. You know, you can run Galaxy Soldier. Cyber Dragon Nasher just gave the deck a lot more power and the ability to make boards easier going first because of what Nasher can do for the deck. And it just really can just, contact fusing is insane. You can just get over cards that say, I'm unaffected by card effects and I can't be destroyed by battle. Deal with me. And Cyber Dragon's like, ha ha ha, Mega Fleet, get it out of here. Like, this deck can really break boards effectively and consistently enough to where it's a contender. It's a solid deck. It really is. Anybody playing Cyber Dragons understands the deck. It can break sometimes, but that's something that every deck can do. Now with Cyber Dragons, it's different because they have cards that are only live if you draw other cards, like Repair Plant is only live when you draw certain cards, Machine Deuce only live when you draw certain cards. But you know, once you get past that point and you're making your deck, assembling it the correct way, this deck is a really effective tactic that's available to the masses to play as a semi sort of budget meta contender. I do believe this deck can be meta, and I feel that it really is. It has high representation and it has strong results to back itself up. I mean, this deck's been topping pretty frequently, not too frequently, but it's been topping in a consistent basis, kind of like just in this pattern where it tops in YCSs and regionals, and virtually anywhere you see Cyber Dragons at, they're probably topping. Even if they don't win the event, they're topping. And of course, in the arsenal itself, you know, Overload Fusion going for Chimera Tech, or Cyberload going for Rampage. Rampage is just an OTK machine. Limiter removals at 3. You can just Seeger for Rampage. That's 4,200 3 times. You have the ability to make Infinity, which is a negation boss monster that also can help you break boards going second. Of course, Machine Dupe Core is still a powerful combo. The deck is just really, really strong, you guys, and it can build boards and break boards as effectively as one and the other. It's kind of like this yin and yang. It's just as good as making them as it is at breaking them. But the weaknesses are, you know, of course, the deck can brick. It can kind of lose to itself. When you restrict it, like to there can only be one, and I would say goes in match and there can only be one can really hurt it. Summon limit can really hurt it. I think that hand traps in general are really strong against a lot of decks that are fragile to it. But Cyber Dragon specifically, sometimes one hand trap is really all you need, because you'll have stuff like where every card in your hand is only live if you resolve core. And I've been in that situation where I'm like, if I resolve core, this is live, this is live, this is live, and this is live. But if I don't, these are all bricks. And it has those hands that the cards are specific and they need to be drawn in conjunction with others. So that's just really one of the inherent weaknesses of it. But like I said, once you get past that point and you build a good Cyber Dragon deck, you can do really good against a lot of the meta decks. Cybernetic Overflow can just clear entire boards. You have Overflow. I've done things where I've done Overflow for the monsters, and during my opponent's in-phase, Cyberload Fusion, shuffling back the banished targets for Overflow to make Chimera Tech Rampage and cleared all the back row. So it actually can just break entire boards, the front and the back row. Cyber Eltonin could just send all monsters on the field to the grave. I know a lot of people don't play, but it's the fact that you can Eltonin and Rampage in the same turn, clear all monsters, clear all back rows, go for the kill. The deck is just really dangerous. Let's see. We got to speed things up. All right, so now in number 6, I gave number 6 to Nekroz. Now, I put it in a subcategory as Nekroz and Herald of Perfection because, in my opinion, these are the two best ritual decks in general. I mean, I'm a huge Prediction Princess fan. Don't get me wrong, I'm an avid fan of them. But I think that if you want to play competitive ritual decks, these are the two that are going to give you the best results. Now, of course, this is my personal favorite, and it's not biased to put this in the top 10. Now, again, it's representation really, so Herald doesn't have a lot of representation, but the reason why I put it in a subcategory with Nekroz is because while Nekroz has more representation than Herald, Herald has a lot more consistency cards, and it can actually do more than Nekroz does, and it also can beat more decks than Nekroz can beat, and it has a higher ceiling than Nekroz, and it just kind of can automatically win if it goes uncontested with just assembling its boards going first. Herald Crusadia is insane, you guys. When you can lock your opponent out from special summoning and back that up with a monster that can negate anything you do that's not once per turn, which means you can't threaten the Crusadia, it's pretty ridiculous. That's pretty strong if you ask me. But the strengths of the decks are kind of similar in the fact that they are really consistent, and I would say of all the decks in these top 10 lists, these two are probably the most consistent. Outside of like Pendulums, I'd say Pendulums are kind of close to them, but they still have them beat in the terms of consistency cards. The fact that these decks can literally do the same exact thing virtually 70+% of the time is just amazing. They have all the consistency cards that you have, the incantations, the prep. This deck can play prep and pre-prep. You have the generic ritual support that you can play like Monjus and Guardragon. You have this deck can play Extravagance. This deck has Zaborg, you know, Bryonyx at 3. Clausulus can be played effectively. You have just so many things that make Nekroz just over the top, borderline broken in the terms of their consistency cards, and the boards they can put out are just anti-meta. Unicorn can just really beat a lot of the best meta decks. In fact, every deck outside of the number 10, which is Guru and Dracos, and I probably say Dinos, Unicorn can really beat them, and they struggle playing around Unicorn. And Brio being able to just break boards going second. Trish is still a thing. Trish is a powerful card, and the fact that this deck has consistent access to a card like Trish and Gunganir, you know, and Nekroz of Sophia, even though people don't play that, you have to just keep in mind, she could just banish entire fields, lock you out of summoning from your extra deck for that main phase that you use her effect. Zabor, just breaking boards going second. Clausulus being a negation you can use in battle phase in the damage step. Valkyrius being a battle fader. Like, they're just in the way they can protect their cards and just consistently put them out over and over and over. And the fact that it can play Zaborg and it can play Vanity's Ruler, it can lock you out of special summoning in general. It's a really strong deck, and it has the results to back it up, so that everything I'm saying can be backed up through the tops that people have gotten playing Nekroz. And Nekroz are kind of just on the rise. You got to be careful. Like, a lot of good players understand the threat that this deck poses. It's a looming threat, and it's a dangerous deck. And the same with Herald. But if you're watching this video, you know I can go on and on about Herald, but to sum up Herald, I'll say this. This deck does just not let you play. It's not fair at all, and it's not supposed to be fair. This deck it doesn't let you play at all. You can literally, you have a solution for every problem. Like, is Spear Mode's a problem? Herald Crusadia, Herald Barrier Statue. Kaiju's are a problem? Herald Crusadia. You can't Kaiju, you can't Lava Golem. You can actually do it consistently, too, where you're just dropping Herald and a Barrier Statue or a Crusadia. And the fact that you can literally have 6 negates and negate every card that your opponent plays. The fact that you can summon multiples of this card. You have the Stick Chair combo for breaking boards. You literally play 9 spells that say draw 2. You have over 17 searching cards that and just give you like 26 consistency cards in your deck outside of your normal summons being Manju and Guardragon, which just makes 32 consistency cards that just search. Like, the deck is so ridiculous, and there's hardly anything as far as the ritual aspect goes that's once per turn. Like, this deck is one of the best, if not, in my opinion, the best going first deck. There is no deck that can just do these things. That just locking you out of your extra deck is one thing, but locking you out from special summoning in general indefinitely and being able to protect that monster that's threatening you, like, you can't just impermanence Christian in this deck. It's nasty. It's disgusting. So, number 6 is Nekroz, but I put Herald in there so that you guys kind of understand that this is the better choice. It's just people just don't respect it, and I don't get it, but that's totally fine. Moving up to the top 5. In number 5, as crazy as this might sound, I gave it to Salamangreat. It has nothing to do with the ban list. It has absolutely Lady D-Bug being hit to 1. Really didn't do anything to hurt this deck in general. The deck still is as powerful as it was before the ban list. It really is. But I gave it to number 5 because the other 4 decks above it actually can do more than what this deck can do and are just as consistent and repetitious as this deck is. Now, there are some elements that this deck has them beat in the terms of recursion. Recovery is this deck's strength. You know, Salamangreats are really good at just recover. Oh, yeah, and I forgot the weaknesses of the ritual decks in general are just stopping them from searching. As long as they can search, they can play through almost anything. They can even play through floodgates. Really, stopping Nekroz and Heralds, you have to hit them where it hurts. You have to stop them from searching. You need Shared Rides, you need Drolls, you need Colossus. Outside of that, Dimensional Barrier and Anti-Spell are really strong cards. The decks can play through hand traps like nobody's business, so that's not even a weakness. But Salamangreats, they've already proven themselves to be one of the best decks, and some people think they are the best deck. Now, this is not only through the results that I've seen it and in most events. It does win almost every event that it's in, and I'm not taking that away from it. But what I am saying is just the comparison of the strengths of this deck versus the weaknesses of this deck compared to the strengths and weaknesses of the decks above it. This deck has a lot more weaknesses and a lot less strengths. What makes this deck so, I guess you could say, elusive, and just what really attracts so many players to it is that it's budget. It's really, really cheap. It's easy to play. There's no difficult learning curve to it. It's very simplistic. Even a new player getting into the game can play this deck very, very effectively. And it kind of just, again, it's that repetitious, consistent factor. Consistency really is just doing things over and over in the same way in a repetitious manner, and that's what this deck has. Like, it doesn't really do over the top stuff. It's not really degenerate or unfair. It's just always going to open the same, and that's just kind of what makes it what it is. But just keep in mind that it's not strong. It's not really that strong going second. That's why a lot of Salamangreat players have to play so many hand traps, and the deck plays so many hand traps because it's not really that good going second. And every deck above it are really better than this deck at going second. They can lose the dice roll and still win, and the boards they assemble can actually just do it. For Salamangreat boards, sometimes it's not enough. So in general, you can still be OTK'd and blown out, and I've seen it happen. So I'm not taking away from the deck. I'm really not. Its inherent weakness is literally just, it's so graveyard reliant that once you start going after the graveyard, this deck really falls apart. And there are fragile points, like, for example, if you normal Gazelle with no extender, just normal summon Gazelle and a Ghost Ogre it, that can just be the end of your turn. It's pretty fragile to Ash Blossom Veiler and DD Crow. The deck can really struggle if you take away, you know, like, for example, if you go after the Spinny and you go after the Jaguar. And also keep in mind that this deck is not very aggressive turn 1, so it really, the biggest strength that it has in terms of finishing the game is Fusion of Fire. But without Fusion of Fire and taking away its access to Fusion of Fire, the deck can't really finish games fast. It can, don't get me wrong, because it has so much recursion from the grave. Like, you get practically 3 to 4 free monsters that can essentially just be your Boar Sword right there. But just keep in mind that there are a lot of ways to stop this deck. What makes it so good and why it's topping so many events is because it has more representation than any other deck, even Sky Strikers. There are more Salamangreat players right now as things stand than there are even Sky Strikers, and it's because this deck is cheap and it's easy. Now in number four, I gave to Orcust. Now, don't get me wrong, I wanted Orcust to be hard on this list, but I can't be biased. Orcust is a monstrosity of a deck, and I think personally, and this is just me and Orcust have the same representation, practically similar. Not like the same, I would say. Well, it's just Orcust variants. People splash Orcust in so much, and this deck really has high representation. It has proven itself thoroughly through regional and YCS tops, and it kind of just shows the consistency of the 1 and 2 card combos that it has, producing those incredibly powerful boards with follow-ups, and the things that it can make. Most decks, let's see the timer, most decks just can't make the same boards that Orcust can make. Orcust can just grind you out. They can make 7 to 8 different boards with the same combo with the way I play Orcust. They have access to the dangers. You know, you can play dangers very effectively. They use the Phantom Knights like practically no other. Even losing Azathoth, the deck can still do some pretty unfair stuff. And with it getting its new support, it's only going to get better. This deck has so many strengths. It's really strong going second. Some people prefer to play going second because of how powerful of a going second deck it can be. Going first, even without Azathoth, it just assembles so many interruptions and can play through hand traps like nobody's business if you play the deck correctly. A lot of people think that stopping the mermaid can stop the turn, but you just have to pilot it. You have to pilot it correctly. You have counters to hand traps being called by the grave. You can play eagle boosters. You also just playing enough of the Orcust monsters, meaning when you open them and you discard them for Nightmare and they Ash or Veil of Nightmare, you can still play. It's just such a strong deck. It really can do a lot. It's very versatile. A lot of people made it out to be either Azathoth or Boarsword. It's not like that. It's really not. Like, if you play Orcust, you understand this deck is disgusting. And with Dark Neostorm on the horizon, this deck is going to be way past number 4 in the top cut. It might end up being the best deck of the format. I have faith. Longaritsu just providing that non-targeting, non-destruction removal gives you a really strong interruption against any deck, regardless of what protection they have, unless they're unaffected. Or Custrion just being a skill drain on legs. Galatea providing you with the toolbox of their spells and traps. And just the different dimension reincarnation, the monster reborn, you know, the graph of the tour guide of the deck, and just the ability to just continually do that over and over and over and over again. That can make Warlord Savage Dragon. It can make rank 8s. It can make rank 4s. It can make rank 7s. It can synchro summon for just, it's so crazy. And just how compact the engine can be if you play it as an engine, just raising the ceiling of other decks and making rogue decks meta. Like, Orcust is just crazy. But the weaknesses of the deck are just that it relies so much on banishing that the best way to cripple the deck is preventing it from banishing in the first place with cards like Lancia. That's the greatest weakness of the deck. Hand traps aren't always a factor because it has so many ways to play around them. Neospace Connector is one of them. Call by the Graves is one of them. Eagle Booster is another. You effectively play with the 3 engage and the Eagle Booster and then the 3 call bys and the 3 connectors plus the Dolphin. You effectively play 11 ways to play around hand trap. Connector and the Dolphin counts, engage and the Eagle Booster counts, and the triple call by. You play 11 ways to stop hand traps. Most decks only have the 3 call bys. So not only can you play around hand traps, but you main deck 11 cards that can just snipe hand traps or play around them or negate them and dodge their effects. So don't really think that about them. Like, you have to play it. Don't go through speculation. Just speak from experience. That's it. But, you know, stopping it from banishing can really hurt. The deck can struggle to evenly match if you're not making Warlord Savage Dragon. And I would say, if the deck has like a lackluster opening and you only can make Mermaid and you don't have any other follow-up and no way to protect it and your opponent ashes it, you kind of just lose. So those are some weaknesses of it. And number 3, coming up to the top 3, I gave it to Pendulums, bro. Pendulums, where you at? Where they at? Oh, where they at? Pendulums. Ah, there we go. Pendulums. I say Pendulum in general because this could be Endymion, Magicians, Orcust, Zephrys, heck, Metalfoes, Magispectors. I mean, dude, it could be any Pendulum deck. Seriously, it could be a Morphage itself. I just say Pendulums in general because Pendulums are just so incredible. The boards that they can make are ridiculous. You just, with the Guardragons and the implementation of Endymion, all Pendulum decks right now are just cutting up, bro. They're over the top. I could talk about the boards, but like, Pendulums have been around long enough to where you guys understand that this deck, even before Endymion came out and before Guardragons were a thing, this deck was already doing some unfair stuff, and you really just needed spear modes to just break the boards. I mean, it just has so much that you can implement into it. Just the fact that so much of the Pendulum cards are splashable and interchangeable amongst each other. You have so many hybrid variants that there really isn't just a pure Magician list or a pure Zephyr or a pure, you know, like Endymion list. They're just always splashing other things. You can assemble negations without using your extra deck. I mean, heck, you can literally put out 6 negates, lock your opponent out from the extra deck in general, and it's so strong going second with the incorporation of the Magician engine. You know, Zephyrs are really strong going second, like Purple Poison breaking boards, Thuban breaking boards, Destrudo, Mare, if you go that route, Destrudo into Black Rose. The fact that it can just OTK you like nobody's business. Pendulums are just stupid strong, you guys. And Pendulums are so strong, they really can beat every single deck on this list. They really can. They just need a little bit more representation, and Endymion got the hype back running, so now there's more Pendulums than there ever was. But we just need a little bit more results before we can just say, oh, it's just the best deck. But we all know what Pendulums do. They have so many strengths, and the weaknesses are weaknesses that a lot of decks don't have. This deck is very weak to like Anti-Spell, Dimensional Barrier. Sometimes Ogre on Electrum can really hurt, but like outside of those 3 fragile points, and with the new integration of the Guardragons and Endymion, the deck can do so much more even if you Ogre the Electrum. Now, Anti-Spell can hurt, but you can main deck outs in the form of Purple Poison, and Dimensional Barrier only hurts to a certain extent because you need Dimensional Barrier with the follow-up. But just keep in mind that those are some weaknesses of the deck. It's not really susceptible to board wipes. It's not really susceptible to kaijus and spear modes, because now the boards it's making, a spear mode and a kaiju is not always enough, and board wipes just get negated. Evenly matched does nothing. There are so much immunities that this deck has to side deck staples like Pankratops and, you know, Twin Twisters and things of that nature. A lot of the cards that people side deck just don't work against this deck. You have to get real specific, and you have to side deck cards that are directly a counter to Pendulums itself, like the Anti-Spells and the Dimensional Barriers I mentioned. So I'm not going to talk too much about them. They're just a ridiculously powerful deck, and Zephyrs are my favorite. Number 2, I gave it to Danger Thunder, Guardragon, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this deck's already proven itself. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm not really a huge fan of it, but it's very unfair. It's very degenerate, like Crusadia, Guardragon, and Pendulums, and Orcust. These are just some unfair, and Heralds of Perfection. Some of the decks on this list are just unfair. I'd say Danger Thunder, Guardragon has proven itself so much to be the best that even with the impact of the ban list, it's not going to shake things up to the point where this deck is not viable. I'd say even so, with the hits, it's still probably going to be one of, if not the best deck of the format. When you just consider the decks in this list, Colossus can cripple, let's see, Crusadia Guardragons. It can cripple Dinosaurs. Colossus can cripple Cyber Dragons. Colossus cripples both Herald and Nekroz. Colossus can cripple sometimes Pendulums, and it can cripple Strikers, and it can cripple Salads because it's really hard for Salamangreats to get over multiple Colossus. So that, just talking about Colossus alone, not only does it cripple almost every deck on this list, but it protects itself, and this deck makes it so consistently and can put out multiples. That alone, just excluding everything degenerate about the deck, the fact that it can rip cards out of your hand, assemble negation boards, break boards going second, playing the Danger Engine, having access to the Guardragons, having so much in its arsenal and its toolbox, just the versatile weapons that it has, the high damage output, the crazy, insane things that this deck can do that are absolutely unfair, excluding all of that. Colossus by himself is just an incredible meta call. It's just the embodiment of this anti-meta floodgate on legs. This deck is bonkers, and I really think that it would be number 1, but I have to give it, oh yeah, and the weakness is really fast. Thunder, really, Droll and Lancia are probably the best side deck staples outside of Spear Modes that can stop this deck. I'm trying to get people to put Chaos Hunter back on the map. Chaos Hunter is a better Lancia. It really is. So stopping this deck from banishing and adding can really slow it down a lot. Hand traps are not always ideal. It can play through a couple. There were some pivotal points, like this, the point when it summoned sorceresses, but since Summon Sorceresses banned, it lost that weakness. So there's less fragile points, and there's less room for error, and there's a lot more room for improvement. So really, you just need board wipes or like Spear Modes, board wipes. Sometimes Kaijus it can help, and then you need like Lancias and Drolls. Number one, oh yeah, we gotta end this. I gave it to Sky Strikers, bro. I still believe that Sky Strikers are absolutely the best deck. They really, people think, oh, like Kagari being hit to 1 just made it not the best deck. This deck not only has proven itself, but it has been one of the best deck, in fact, the best deck for over a year now, bro. That's a long freaking time, man. Like, it's been over a year, dude, that this deck has been in the running as a dominant contender for our format. I mean, Sky Strikers, if you think they haven't proven themselves, I don't know where you're staying and what rock you live under, but this deck is just incredible. It's very fair. It's very balanced in my opinion. A lot of people think this deck's unfair, but when you actually consider every other deck that's not Sky Strikers and Salamangreats on this list, there's a lot of things about those decks that are not fair. So just because multi-roll can be a little bit unfair doesn't make this a degenerate strategy. Sky Strikers are very consistent. They've proven themselves to be a dominant deck that can just pretty much overcome all the controversy and all of the hate that the deck gets, like all the cards that are supposed to beat it, like in spite of the existence of Imperial Order, of Anti-Spell, of Naturia Beast, of Secret Village of the Spellcasters, of Colossus. This deck absolutely still has continued to thrive and prove to be a dominant deck in spite of the actual, I'm talking about the weaknesses before the strengths. The weaknesses of the deck, it's been able to thrive and play around that and mitigate those weaknesses and circumvent by just implementing more cards into the main deck, you know, the outs to it, and the fact that it's versatile. It can be played as a going first variant, a going second variant. It also has a toolbox at its disposal with the spells just being searchable spot removal, searchable protection, searchable utility, searchable negation, searchable recursion, draw power. The deck is just really strong, and it can grind for a very long time. It can play the slow game, and it can beat you at the slow game. It's really strong in time. Keep that in mind, that of all the decks, when it comes to time in the round, Sky Strikers have the best advantageous edge because of Hayate and Kaina, and just Ray from Grave is just so annoying and so powerful, just blocking attacks with Kaina, and just it's just really strong. And then there's all the back row hate like Denko Sekkas, just Twin Twisters, evenly matched. And in spite of all the weaknesses, this deck still overcomes it all and wins regionals and YCSs and tops every single event that Sky Strikers in. They're at the top tables. There have never been an event that Sky Strikers have been in representation and have not topped. If that's not proving it to you, I don't know what is. And that is the reason why this deck is still the best deck. Forget the fact that Kagari's at 1. We have literally Hercules base, okay? I don't get why people don't understand. Hercules base has always been a good card. Like, literally, your answer to the problem is something that you already have access to in your arsenal. Hello, somebody. So that it's almost like it didn't get hit at all, and it just really it's so good, you guys, seriously. And it's a high learning scale. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. You can't just play your cards just because you can. You have to be really smart. It's a very skillful deck, and I respect it, and it's very honorable. Sky Strikers are still the best deck, and this is as currently as things stand. This is just what I believe. I could have put Danger Thunder over it. I could have put Pendulum over it. I could have put Salad and Orcust. But no other deck on this list has more representation and has proven and gotten better results. So even though I think personally Orcust and Pendulums are just stronger than this deck, I think that Danger Thunder kind of can beat this deck just by assembling, you know, multiple Colossus plus negations and ripping cards out of your hand. It's the fact that, excluding my opinion, the representation and the results from top cuts that this deck has under its belt are just undeniable, and they prove themselves, and they just validate every counter argument to the arguments that someone would make saying this is not the best deck. So yes, Sky Strikers are still the best deck. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my top 10 best decks of the format. I am a very in-depth content creator in general, so my videos are typically longer than average. But for those of you who have the patience, thank you so much for watching this video. God bless you guys. Make good choices. Don't hurt your brain cells. Stay tuned for future content, and stay positive, and have a beautiful day. Peace.